My name is Bree. I work here at Audreys. I run a lot of the events, and on behalf of Audreys Books, we would like to acknowledge that we are located in Amiskwichi, Wiskaiken, on Treaty 6 territory and Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. These are the traditional homelands of many Indigenous nations, such as the Neheyo, Dene, Nakota Sioux, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Niitsitapi, Métis, and Inuit, who have lived on and cared for these lands since time immemorial. And we offer encouragement to reaffirm our relationships with each other and the land on which we gather, but also to engage in meaningful action by engaging with Indigenous works and listening to Indigenous voices. I would also like to add off script that land acknowledgements without any meaningful action behind them are empty platitudes. And as we approach the fourth Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I want to offer encouragement to think about what that means to us as settlers, what our relationships to this land are, and how we can engage meaningfully with the Indigenous peoples of these territories. And thanks. And just have a couple other housekeeping things to get out of the way really quickly. So first of all, we do have a washroom. It is towards the back of the store that way. You will come across a brown door that says, "Don't go through here, staff only." That's the one you go through. And the washroom is the first door on your right. It will have a bathroom sign on it. The other one says "out of order." Don't go through that one. You will never be seen again. We also have copies of both of these books that you can purchase upstairs after the reading. And as well, we're going to be open for a little bit after, so feel free to browse around, ask questions. We love to yap about books. That's what we're here for. But have a wonderful night, and I will turn it over to your host. Thank you.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is I think, bigger audience than we were expecting. This was a problem of fitting chairs in, a problem we hope to have. So this is really lovely. So thanks for spending your Wednesday with us. I'm excited to welcome you folks here in Audrey's Books. And we also have, with all of our tech set up, we've got folks joining virtually. And we're also recording this. We're going to be releasing it as a podcast episode. Joanna and I have a podcast Tackle Tuesday. And so this will be part of our upcoming season. So again, welcome to everyone. Our theme for the upcoming season is Women in Leadership, Women at Work. So we thought this discussion would be a really good fit. So that's why we've got the mics and the tech and all the things. So we'll, But
you're not on camera. It's just we're the ones on
That's
camera.
right. Yeah.
So
How many folks do we have online? 9.
we're also Zooming, so welcome.
And there's
60 in
60
the room.
here.
That's really exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So my name is Katie Allen. I'll be facilitating our discussion with both of our authors this evening. I work with Joanna. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Sinogap Solutions. So Joanna can go a little bit more into kind of the background of her work and how that lends its way to the company. But I'll be facilitating this discussion. I had the pleasure of reading both books and got a lot out of it. And even thinking back to our discussion last week to prep for the event, we had a really wonderful discussion. We didn't necessarily follow the questions I prepared, which is fine. We had a really great kind of organic conversation. So I'm kind of excited to see where things go this evening. So basically, we've got about 45 minutes where I will throw some questions both at Joanna and Kathy. We'll have some time at the end for you folks to ask them any questions that you have. And then we'll be able to kick around after and mingle and chit chat for our last hour. So I think with that, I thought rather than me reading a bio, they're both very impressive women who have done a lot of things. I thought my first question would be just having them reflect on their leadership journey and really what led them to write these books. So I think we'll start there, and I'll hand this to, sure.
Yeah.
You have your mic. So
I have my mic.
I'm
You
going to
do.
sit. I just wanted to see everyone.
Yes.
before I started.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going first?
Yes.
Yes. Well, welcome. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you tonight. So as many of you know, I'm an educator. So I began my life as a teacher, didn't expect to go into leadership necessarily, but as I went along in my career, just wanted to make a difference and step up. But I had some limiting beliefs that I had to unpack and dismantle before I could step into further responsibility. And so I learned a lot from different people. And then when I was first appointed a principal, I thought, what did I ever do to prepare me for this? And so in many ways, this book is writing a book that I wish I'd had as a young leader. But the other thing I see is that as women, our lives change through various iterations, pre-kids, with kids, grandkids, aging parents, working, refirement or retirement. And so it's so important for us to keep reflecting and thinking about who we are, what we want to offer the world, and how we can keep making a difference in sustainable ways. So I had this was born in some of my doctoral work, and they said you should write a book, and I was like, how, when, and so it was really in moving to Nova Scotia a couple of years ago that I found the space and time to do the deep thinking and start writing. So yeah, this feels like a dream come true to be here at Audreys with all of you, and then to share the message and help others think, how can we step into our best life and our greatest contribution to the community. So
Right. Yeah. So just like Kathy, myself as well, my book is based on my doctoral work. The reason why I wanted to write the book, well, goes back to the reason why I wanted to do my PhD. And so I took a 10-year hiatus from my master's to my PhD. I was already working as a manager with the government of Alberta, and we'll get to how we met in a moment, but that's where we met. And as I was moving upwards in my career, I found that it was just because you're really good at your job as an informal leader, or what we call an individual contributor, doesn't mean that when you get promoted to a formal leadership position that the skills that you have naturally transfer seamlessly to a leadership role. And what I discovered was we don't do a good job, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's what sector, public, private, nonprofit. There's similarities in regards to, we promote people that are really good at what they did in terms of why we hired them, and then we just hope and pray that they figure it out when they become a leader. And the job fundamentally changes. In many ways, it's, you have to be a psychologist, a therapist, a social worker, and also be a really good manager when it comes to systems thinking, strategic planning, budgeting, and I thought we were doing a disservice to our people. And we were both public servants. And when we fail as managers, our people fail. And when they fail, the community that we serve they fail too, right? They don't get the services that they need. So I decided to go back and do a thesis on, well, how do we better support managerial learning and development? Welcome, come on in. We have to find a room to like put more chairs down for everyone. Hi. And so I thought I wanted to look at how not just to support people through formal training, which is my backgrounds in learning and development, but how do we leverage the workplace environment as a way to support everyday learning, which is really what my thesis was on. And so when I completed it, I always had a passion to write the book. I wanted to actually resign from government, start my own business. And I thought, this is one way that could really situate me as a thought leader and an expert. It's a great business card. It's a good way to promote yourself. And I wanted to, and I know managers are really busy, so I wanted to make it quite short and sweet. And as my husband says, it's a good bathroom read. So yeah. Couple of bathroom breaks, you should get right through it. So yeah, that's my story.
Excellent. No, thank you both for that. And the next question you sort of touched on a bit, but I guess I'll go back to Joanna just to elaborate a bit more on how you know each other. So maybe a bit more on that story.
Okay. Do you want to start with this one?
Or you can start.
Okay.
And I'll pick it up.
And when we met last week to just touch base before we met today. And I'm like, remind me again. I know we met Ministry of Education. So I worked first with Justice and Solicitor General for many years. After I completed my thesis, I wanted to move up, and I hit the ceiling, I guess, where I was. There was really, unless my boss, the joke is my boss either quit or died. I wasn't moving up. There was no vacancy. So I needed to move. I needed to go somewhere. And so she supported me to go to education. There was a spot open for a senior manager position. And an old colleague of mine was actually there, Sean Carter. So I was really excited to go there. And my old boss, Curtis Clark, who is now the deputy minister, was there. And my mentor, who also encouraged me to do my master's and wrote a recommendation letter for me. And I think he was critical and gave me the confidence I needed to even think I was smart enough to do a PhD, honestly. And so I was like, I would love to go there. And so Kathy was working really closely with Sean in strategic engagement,
Yeah.
which it was a really, really cool unit. I mean, their job was to figure out how to not only engage the stakeholders of Alberta education, but internally as well.
Mhm.
And you were doing some cutting edge, innovative things in terms of engagement and how to use tech, videos, podcasts. I was just like, I wanted to
Not
be
me
there.
personally, I'll just.
Yeah.
Want to be.
Yeah, we were all
Yeah,
together,
yeah,
right? It's good
yeah.
to see you. And so we were working on a mentoring project. So it was a
Mhm,
mentoring program that they were trying to launch. I wanted to join. You were part of that.
Well, and we were connected through.
Oh, no, you have a mic already. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
yes, through LinkedIn, and I saw that Joanna was putting her writing out there, and I thought, I want to write a book. And so I reached out to her and I said, could we be in a peer mentoring group? Could we have a writing group so we can support each other in that journey? And so that was really how it started.
Yeah.
And another colleague of
Shannon.
ours joined us in that as well. So this path of supporting other women and empowering each other and saying, you know, there's lots of good work for all of us. How do we lift each other up to be our best, right? It was,
Yeah.
so that was an amazing opportunity.
And that was like 2019, just shy of 2020. And then you can think
Yeah.
about like 3 to 4 years later,
Mhm,
we wrote
mhm.
our book. So
Mhm.
good on you.
Yeah.
Good on me.
Well done. Mhm.
Good on both of you.
Oh,
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, that kind of lends nicely to the next question. So collaboration and community are themes that both of your books touch on. So I've got here, Kathy, maybe you can talk a bit about how this collaborative book launch came to be,
Mhm.
because this is kind of a unique opportunity for both of you to reconnect and
It is.
and talk about your books. So
Yeah, well, it had always been a dream of mine to, once I wrote a book, to have an event at Audrey's. I lived downtown and I would walk by here and see what was happening. And so when I spoke to Levi at Audrey's and they were so supportive, he goes, we like to have 2 authors. And I thought that's perfect. And I thought of Joanna immediately. And since we had sort of similar themes, and because her book came out during the pandemic, she didn't have an opportunity to do this kind of work. And I love the thought of a conversation, right? I've done a different book events in Nova Scotia and around, and I don't want it to be just me, wah, wah, wah. It's about the conversation. It's about what's been true for me. What are you finding that helps you to thrive and support? And it truly, as a young leader, I thought I had to have all the answers and have it figured out and appear like I had it all together. And truly, as I've come through the years, it's working together in community. It's saying, this is what I love and can offer, but I really appreciate what you've done here with the technology. So I just knew that would elevate the conversation and the event.
Mhm.
So it's a delight and an honor to be in conversation tonight.
I was really, really pleased, really thankful and grateful that you asked me. And as soon as you said, because we flew in from Toronto, we were in TO yesterday for work, for a workshop that we were delivering. And I thought, you can't say no to an opportunity like this. We're flying in the morning. Yes, it's definitely a yes. And then
Yes.
and then other people were like, what if the flight doesn't make it? So we had a whole plan. Yeah, but of course I had to complicate everything and bring in a virtual room. But yeah, because I mean, you have folks that live obviously like
Mhm.
friends and
Yeah.
that live in Nova Scotia. I'm originally from Montreal, so I thought let's
Mhm.
this would be great to have as many people as we can attend.
Yeah. And here's the thing about thriving. This is not having a perfect life and everything going your way. As you may have noticed, my ultra fashionable footwear here and my little trip and the sprain that was actually a break. And so the universe conspired to make this happen
Yes.
tonight. You got back from Toronto. I got on that plane from Nova Scotia. So here we are. So it's really thinking about what am I in control of and how do I focus my energies there to do the things that matter, not just for me, but for the community and for each other. So
Well said.
mhm.
okay, well, with that, I kind of want to dive into some of
Yeah.
the themes of the book. When we again met last week, there were a few that we pulled out that some consistent themes. So the first one was around self-awareness and learning, which both of you touched on quite a bit in terms of your own experience and reflections, lots of vulnerability in there that I appreciated kind of being able to read and connect with. Some great reflection questions, but I'll start with a question for you, Joanna, and then Kathy, you can kind of add your bit. So Joanna, the book emphasizes the importance of learning in leadership and self-awareness. So how do you believe self-awareness contributes to effective leadership? And I believe there's an excerpt that you might want to start with. I'll let you decide.
Right. Yeah, let me start with the excerpt. That's a good idea. I was going to chat about it a bit first, but let me start with that, and then it'll lead me into what I discovered. So my research, I interviewed managers, supervisors, and directors. And when I interviewed them, I just wanted to know, like, how do you do what you do? How did you learn to do what you do? And through that, some things came out that I wasn't expecting necessarily. And one of those things was emotional intelligence. And so let me read the excerpt and then I'll get into it a little bit more. So this one specifically, obviously about specific to self-awareness. So managers express the importance of being aware of their strengths and limitations so they can continually develop and grow. So here's one quote. When I get to the situation where I run out of things, of knowledge, I have to reboot or re-educate myself to new things. My competencies haven't changed a lot, but I have to focus on improving them. Curtis also reiterated that importance of accurate self-assessment. You have to be willing to accept that you don't know everything. Rely on the people that know more than you. You have to be open, willing to change and accept change. Know the things you can't control, you were just saying, like political influence and budgets, and you have to be positive. I think that is a conscious decision every day. You have to be what you want everyone else to be. And I think this is poignant and really true, whether you want to be that on that day or not. Right? Yeah. And so when I was doing my candidacy exam, which is when before you get approval to go and do your research, you have to sit in front of a panel of professors and they grill you, and they basically then give you permission to go ahead and conduct your research. And one of the professors there, who I really admired and had a lot of respect for, she said, "Sounds like you're conflating," and I know we're going to get into leadership and management. "You're conflating leadership and management. I think they're very different." And I was like, okay. She's like, "I encourage you to research that." I'm like, "Sure, I will." But she was really right. And I was conflating them because I thought if you're a good manager, you have to be a good leader. To me, what's the difference? But they are very different competencies. And that's what came out. And when I started to analyze the data in my research, and I was looking at all of the quotes and the themes that I had written on flip charts around my wall, was like, and I think I write this in the book too, it was like a hand came out of the flip chart and slapped me across the face and said, they're talking about emotional intelligence. That's what they're talking about. And self-awareness is the first domain of emotional intelligence. And how without, and we, in our workshop yesterday, we said out of the 4 domains, and some of the other domains really focus on self-management, regulation, developing really positive relationships with other people, conflict management. I said, which one do you think is the most important? And they said self-awareness, because if you're lacking self-awareness, how do you grow? And here's the thing with self-awareness that I discovered was if you really want to develop it, it's not always a pleasant journey. It can be quite painful and uncomfortable, especially when you come face to face to an unconscious bias you have. And you start to feel a certain kind of way when someone says something, you get defensive. And people who are really working on becoming more self-aware question the defensiveness and take a step back and don't attack, but pause and think and reflect, which is very hard. I mean, how many of us have lost our cool sometimes, right? And we learn through that. And that's what self-awareness is. It doesn't mean we're perfect. It's not about perfection. It's about practice and intentional effort. And so I appreciated what they said. And to me, that was the foundation to everything. If you can work on that, the competency in the other domains will come. And if you're not self-aware, then you kind of hit a wall there when it comes to learning. They're very intricately linked. And that was the other thing I learned. The more emotionally intelligent you are, the more better you're a better learner. Yeah. And it starts with self-awareness.
Great. Maybe I'll jump in just because I'm curious. Kathy, you integrated so many really great reflection questions throughout the book, I think, in an effort to help people become more self-aware. So I want to give you a chance to add to some of that.
Absolutely. And the thing is, you hear that all the time. Oh, you need to be more self-aware. You need to take care of yourself. But what does that really mean? And so few people tell you, what does that actually look like? And so as I was a new leader and trying to figure things out, I had developed some journaling strategies that really helped me. And one was, as a new principal, weekly, I would reflect on what did I like about this week? What did I do well? What didn't I like? What would I do differently? So it doesn't have to be daily. You think, oh, I can't fit that in, but just weekly. And that helped me be more attuned to what am I liking? What do I want to move more towards that? And if I'm not liking it, is there an option? Can I delegate that? Or do I need to learn something? But it helps us move in that direction of our thriving, to know what we're liking. And when you have a great day, what made it a great day? How can you get more of that in your life? If it's a bad day, what made it a bad day? Do you need to eat breakfast? Did you need to take that 5 minutes to just breathe and think before you have that meeting? And so it looks different for each of us, but that taking time to reflect regularly is absolutely critical to knowing, where are my learning edges? You know, what was the trigger there? How do I do better the next time with who I am and what I'm in control of?
Learning edges. I never heard that term before.
I'm not sure if I have either. I think I just made it up.
Okay. I was like, I like it.
Well, I don't
Can
know
you
the
tell me?
reference. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like it. I'm going to explore that a little bit more. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
heard learning architect, but learning edges is
Mhm.
interesting. Yeah. Kind of like maybe you get to the edge of something and you have to like, you want to go
Mhm.
beyond the edge and you have to be willing to go beyond that.
Or you move into a new area,
Yes.
or your life changes, you move, your book is published and now you need to promote it. There's a learning edge of the things that you haven't done before, right? So if we want to grow, and I think of it, I don't like the term self-help so much as self-development. It's not to be somebody who's better or different, but to step more fully into who you are and what you want to offer the world. So yeah.
I appreciate that. And yeah, again, you talk lots about building almost a bit of a habit or the muscle of being able to do these sorts of things regularly. And that becomes a bit preventative as well in terms of then taking care of yourself. So that's great.
Yeah. It was practices. So that was when I'd been writing different chapters and playing with the ideas in the early stages. But I thought it's practices. It's what we repeatedly do that shapes who we are and how we show up. And we're all practicing something. What is it you repeatedly spend time doing? And what's the fruit of that in your life? And is that the fruit you want? Or if you want to be more peaceful or more healthy or more attentive in relationships, how are you practicing that? What are you repeatedly doing to bear that good fruit in your life and relationships and work?
More like that. Before I take us in a slightly different direction, Joanna, was there anything more management versus leadership? There may have been an excerpt. Did you want to spend a bit more time on that?
Yes. Yeah. Dawn, I'll read that one too. 1 second. Okay. So this comes from the chapter called Checking Our Biases at the Door. And it was all around like our misconceptions or understanding of what we think leadership actually is. So this is where I write, I used to believe that being a manager and leader were one and the same. It was only when I conducted my own research that my belief system was challenged. The research participants in my PhD study discussed how they faced multiple dilemmas. They talked about the importance of considering the larger system they worked within, while at the same time considering their employees' needs. And I call it the balancing act of a manager, right? Being there for your staff, but also knowing that you do represent the organization in many ways, and you have to ensure that the goals that are critically important to the organization that they basically put out there, that you're working diligently towards, but you're also empowering your staff to be able to achieve those goals too. It's a balance sometimes. One of the research participants compared the concept of leadership and management to static and dynamic processes. So he said that management is the static side of the business. It's about ticking your boxes, the budget, allocating resources. The dynamic part is the leadership part. You can't just be one or the other. You have to be out there and visible and working with your team. That is how you get buy-in. I can sit here in this office all day long and not see anybody, and I would never know their names, and they would never approach me to provide me with feedback. That's another way we develop self-awareness, is when people give you feedback. You have to do a lot of heavy lifting in some ways to develop the relationship for people to feel safe enough to give you that feedback. So how can I make informed decisions if all I do is sit in my office? So I thought that was powerful, because a lot of the stuff that we hear with the leaders that we're trying to develop is, I'm so busy. I don't have time to go outside of my office. One person made a joke and said, so I guess all we're going to do is just chit chat and have a good time all day, not get any work done. And I'm like, if you actually develop the relationships with your staff. In many ways, you'll get to know what their strengths, their weaknesses, what they need, what drives and motivates them, and they will make your job easier. And the managers are always saying that I don't have time, were micromanaging, they were too much into the weeds, they were putting fires out, they didn't know how to empower their staff to do a lot of the things that they shouldn't have been doing. So I felt like that was a huge challenge. So it was really nice to see someone acknowledge that that's really what it takes to be a leader, right?
Thanks for that. I mean, before we move away, so that was kind of the self-awareness and learning theme. Kathy, is there anything else you want to add to that? Okay. Then I think I'll move. So authenticity and purpose is something else that both your books spend some time talking about. So Kathy, you looked at the importance of cultivating wholeness in leadership. So I'd love for you to share an excerpt to talk about what wholeness means to you and how leaders can cultivate it within themselves.
Thank you so much. Words are so important. So playing with those words of wholeness or authenticity, or what does that mean? So here's a little piece. Although many of the featured stories are about educators, this is not a book about how to become a principal. Rather, it's an exploration of how many different women have found ways to care for themselves, for other people, and for ideas in a holistic manner. It's not a book about how to be a leader in a man's world, but how to value your unique human gifts on a path to authentic leadership. It grows out of my belief that we need every person contributing their gifts for the well-being of all, and that thriving is mutual. This is not a book about sacrificing yourself, your family, or your career. It's not a book about striving to be someone different, but about dwelling in the fullness of who you are. This is a book about wholeness, about weaving the many aspects of your life into an offering of strength and possibility. It's not a book about being the boss, but about empowering others to be their best. I embrace the feminine ethic of care as a strength, not a weakness. It's not a book about being the supreme leader who knows and does it all, but rather about cultivating shared leadership within community, where we all offer strengths as we depend on each other to contribute their gifts. And so so that concept of wholeness has been a key concept, and the cultivating it comes from practice, and who I am shifts, as we retire or shift to another job or another position. It's like, how does this reflect? What can I offer in this setting? What does this call of me? What do I want to do? So that was a big thing, instead of what do I have to do or should do? And there's lots of those things in our life that we build our time and energy around. But what do I want to do? And starting to listen to that voice inside of what's calling to us. And then finding that really cool things happen when you do more of what you want to. You're offering what only you can give, and it fills you up instead of draining you in the offering of it.
Oh, there's so much in there that I'm sure, Joanna, you might want to speak to. Purpose stands out. I think you talk quite a bit, Joanna, about finding your purpose and having that kind of help to guide you, even though, like you said, you might evolve as a person and change. So I don't know if you want to start there or if you had another.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the whole thing with authenticity, and we talk a lot about being authentic, and developing self-awareness is like, what's your purpose in life, right? What gets you up out of the day, that intrinsic source of motivation that keeps you going during the really, really tough times. And if we don't have a sense of purpose, then nothing is anchoring us. And so really during difficult times, like imagine, I like to use those nautical metaphors, right? When times are tough, or if there's a rock, like the sea is rocky and there's lots of waves, sometimes you need to put the anchor down, or sometimes you just need to pause, regroup, before you move forward. So that purpose is that anchor. And knowing that purpose makes you more authentic, and knowing your values as well. So we talk a lot about being an authentic leader, and sometimes we get flack for that word. Authenticity was the Webster's word. Did you know this, for 2023?
Okay.
Yes.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's a good word. But I think a lot of people were like, don't bring your whole self to work. Nobody wants to see your whole self at work. And there was all of these things around, what does it mean to really be authentic? And I think it's just knowing your purpose, your values, and staying true to that, and using that to guide you when it comes to your decision making, and also making sure, like you said, I think that's what makes you whole as a human being. And so I like the word, and I think it gets, it's a misunderstood sometimes. Now, when talking about wholeness, sorry, you're going to
Yeah.
say something.
No, a challenge for lots of people is they don't feel safe to bring their whole self to work, right? You're in a circumstance where you do share a little bit of your maybe your struggle or vulnerability or your interests or other pastimes, and it's not, you get a response that doesn't make you feel safe. And so it can be tricky, and I recognize that, and that's happened to me at different times as well. And so you keep noticing, is this for good? And is this a place where I can be my whole authentic self? Or who are the people around me who bring that out and who let me be that way? And then once you've experienced that, you want to create those conditions for other people. So I really appreciate about your book, Joanna, how you are really focusing on how a work environment can promote learning and develop and really help people do that. And I would say that my book is really a lot about the personal work of leadership. What am I in control of? What's the personal work that I can do to show up the way that I want to and offer what I want, knowing that there's, all of that other stuff happening perhaps in your work environment. So it's, it can be tough sometimes, but yeah.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, because your book focused on women in leadership. My book was just on leadership. It's almost interesting because my participants, there was a limitation to my study because it was done in a law enforcement setting. The majority of my participants were men. I had 2 women, honestly. I didn't have a lot of women. So that was a significant limitation. So when they talked about authenticity, it would have been interesting to hear, because what you said was a really important point, like a woman's perspective on what it's like to be authentic in a male-dominated industry. And we have a program for women in leadership. It's called Women Up. And we talk a lot about that. And what we're discovering is if you're from an underrepresented group, especially in the workforce, it is a lot harder for you to actually be truly authentic because you're judged for it, because you're different. And I think we're making ways towards understanding that there's different ways to lead, there's different ways to be, there's different expertise, there's different dimensions of identity that should all be welcome, and with that come different experiences and ways of being and knowing, but we still have a ways to go. And we usually invite a woman to come to speak at the orientation session of the first workshop, and we had a wonderful woman. She was a director of she worked for the RCMP, the forensic lab services, and she was the director of operations there. And she's biracial, and she said that her identity was really tied to how she led, and she wanted to do a research study for her master's to better understand other women's leadership, being in executive leadership in a male-dominated industry. And there was this one woman who shared her story, and she said, when I decided to just even wear my hair curly, not wear it straight anymore, it was a risk for me. But she wore curly, she went to work, and what happened was pretty magnificent. Other women came to her and said that they wanted to start doing the same. So when we choose not to be fully authentic, we're like, what are we preventing from really manifesting in our workplaces? It takes courage, I think.
It absolutely
takes a lot of
does.
bravery, and it's not easy, because I'm sure a lot of stories in this room of women who have stood up and wanted to be truly authentic and got reprimanded for it, right? But so anyways, when you said that, it made me think of that. I just, out of curiosity, how did the women talk about that, or challenges around that?
Well, and the women in my study were largely in education, not-for-profit, and government were the areas of their experience. And so, which may be more female-dominated industries. So I think there's different challenges in the different industries. So I think when you're in those fields, there's this expectation of care above and beyond your work. Oh, of course you're going to feed everybody or organize that party or do those things. And so that can be a challenge. But what we also see in those industries is that there's a large proportion of men at the top of those, at the highest superintendents and so on. The women might be 60 or 70% of the front line, and men are 60 or 70% of the top leadership positions. So it's still, it still doesn't mean if you're in a female dominated area that flowing up to leadership comes naturally. And so, and there's a double bind that women often face. You're expected to be caring, which is a good thing. But if, but then you're diminished for it. Oh, you're too soft and caring, right? So do they want that? Is that a strength or not? And also thinking about, because the second section on careful leadership, how do you create a culture of care so that you're not the one doing all the caring or the only one doing the caring that wears you out as you're trying to do the work? How do you set things up so people can care for each other and you're nurturing that that piece? So I mean, that is an ongoing piece. And I think the other thing as we relate to this, there's certain things that only you can do. It's only you who can figure out what your purpose is, what your values are, what you want to offer the world. And then there's the quality of our workplace. And so you can have a fabulous workplace, but if you don't know yourself and what you want to offer, you can't truly thrive. You can know yourself and you might not be in a healthy workplace that nurtures well-being. And so both of those things have to come together. And my hope is that when you are thriving, when you found a way to live your life according to your values and to do work in a meaningful, sustainable way, that you can create that environment for other people. You've needed some flexibility. How can you offer that for other people? How can you spell each other off and have a place that is that allows everybody to find their path of authenticity as well as belonging and community?
I was gonna say, we call it a success circle. And so I got the concept from Forbes, I think it was Forbes, right? An article, the 9 types of people to have in your success circle. Because some of the women we work with have not a big fan of the term networking and having a network. But the minute, we start using terms like success circle, they feel like it's more nurturing, it's more two-way, it's reciprocated, it's reciprocal, knowing. So people in your success circle support you, but you support them as well. And I always say, like, I don't know, Brene Brown, she tells a story about her daughter at school, the marble jar friends. I don't know if you know the story, like, people who take marbles continually out of your jar, the marbles represent your energy, I think, if I'm saying it right. And are there people who are just taking the marbles out, and they deplete you? Because at times they need to be giving you marbles back, right? So knowing how to support others, but that they're going to support you and it's reciprocal is absolutely important.
Huge.
That's great. I think some of these, I'm also aware of time. So I'm probably gonna ask a couple
Oh,
more.
yeah, wow.
I'll keep going. I'll ask a few more questions, but there's so many things I want to ask. So I think before I move us over to self-care, community and self-care, maybe to sort of wrap up a few questions, just on some of these topics on authenticity and the experience of both your participants. When we met last week, we also reflected on, there's been a lot of books out there for a long time on leadership written by men, and all genders can read these books. Women have been reading them. But I kind of want you both to speak to maybe the experience or the impact you hope the book written by a woman and some of the experiences you share even personally, kind of the why behind that or thoughts on that.
I'd like to turn to Kathy, just because you said something when we met last week, and you said there's been so many books for the longest time written by men on leadership for men. Right. And so we need about men. So we need a book written by a woman for women that men can read
About women
that men can read, and they can get a lot out of that too. Right. So yeah. You go first.
And I mean, I'm always been careful in sharing my research. I'm not saying that women are better leaders than men. I've been blessed or benefited from many strong male leaders that I've learned a lot from and who exhibit care. So I'm not creating that dynamic there, but I believe women experience leadership differently. We have different societal norms. It's the water we swim in, different expectations that people have for us. And so I wanted to give life to the lived experiences of women. So my original doctoral research was a narrative inquiry, which goes deep in the lived experience of people. And so to be able to say, this is what it feels like to be a woman in leadership who's also mothering, who's juggling and holding all of these things. So I hope it's an insight into the thinking that goes behind, because it's very easy to feel like we have to have a mask. Oh, it's great, I've got it all together. Going to the principal meetings, how are things? Fine. How are things with you? Fine. But to give people a chance to say, I remember after speaking to women, feeling like I'm not alone. Right? We are holding it together. We're doing great work. but those fabulous women also have limiting beliefs. They're juggling many things. They're wondering, am I doing it good enough? And they probably are. They're rocking it, but our voice, our inner critic, may diminish our ability to say that. So there's power in sharing our stories. There's power in sharing our vulnerability. And like you said, when we kind of gain the courage to do that, then we create space for other people to do that. And together we can either dismantle those limiting beliefs. You are awesome. You know, I think of the one small thing that didn't go right. And so we can give each other feedback about what we're doing well and contributing. And then we can hold each other up in the humanity and those weak spots that inevitably are part of our journey. So it's yeah.
Mhm. As you were speaking, a lot of things were going off in my mind, and you I was gonna say, I wasn't even gonna read this one excerpt. As you were speaking, I'm like, oh, I gotta say this. Like
Mhm.
Kathy was saying, that
Go
doesn't make me
ahead,
think
do
about it. But I think that when you talk about women in leadership and authentic and some of the challenges around that, you have to look at the assumptions and the biases around that are put on women in terms of the kind of leader they can be. And so in the book, I talked about the confidence gap theory, which basically states that as women, we're genetically predisposed in some way to have less confidence than men. And I say that's utter bullshit. It's not true. If you look at it, like, I mean, going back to male dominated industries, right? And we see some of the challenges that women face. And I tell a story, I think actually it's in the book, but I remember one day I went into work and none of the guys were there. None of them. And I went to my boss, who was a woman, and I said, where are all the guys? They're at the golf tournament. And I go, how come you're not there? She goes, I don't know. I wasn't invited by the inspector. I play golf. All the women were not invited. And guess what happens at the golf tournaments, right? The schmoozing, the networking, there's an acting position that's opened up long-term. You're going to go into it. Okay. You're going to be the new staff sergeant, right? Like that's what was happening. The mentors were assigned. So so obviously the men were supported in a way where naturally the confidence came through those networking opportunities, through the supports that they had. The guys, the men in my study talked about how they were tapped on the shoulder by a man who said, I see something in you that I saw in myself, and I think you'd be a great manager. And that was their path to leadership. One of my participants reached out to me after the book, I think actually before the book, but after my thesis was published. And he said, there's a challenge that I'm experiencing. There's this young man. I want him to be a manager. I've tapped him on the shoulder. He really is fighting it tooth and nail. He doesn't want to be a manager. And this was a really small center where there was very few women. And I said, I'm going to challenge you to say, why don't you actually make yourself available to everyone who wants to be mentored? Because if he doesn't want to be mentored, maybe one or two of the women in your area, in your center do, right? And we talked about this last time we met. I never heard back from him. So I don't know how he took that piece of advice,
Yeah.
But then how do you say we're predisposed to not be confident when we're put into situations like that? And there's still a lot of rhetoric out there, like, looking at what's happening in the States, whatever way you lean politically, there is conversation about whether Kamala Harris has what it takes to be the first female of color president. And when some people share with me, men and women, that they don't think she's competent, usually it's followed up with a bit more probing with, honestly, I really don't know anything about her. So if there's no facts in terms of her competence, in terms of her career and her abilities, what facts are available to you that you're basing your opinion on? There's two. What are they? She's a woman, and she's a woman of color. And there you have it. And so to me, that is a deep-rooted unconscious bias that we have. And we have to ask ourselves, why am I so quick to judge someone that I really know nothing about? And then ask yourself, is it based on her gender and her color, her race? And then if you start to get defensive and uncomfortable, sit with it. Just sit with it for a bit, because now you're on the path to developing self-awareness.
Absolutely. And the focus of my work was on gender, but I recognize that I hold a lot of privilege, right? And like your participant said he saw somebody that looked like him. And we're often drawn to people who look like us. But the gift of my more recent experience has been learning from so many people with diverse backgrounds and saying, help me understand, teach me more about that. And the great wealth and wisdom that comes from people of color, people from different cultures. Tell me more about that. That's really interesting. And they're a collectivist viewpoint where they're taking care of everybody instead of the individualist who's the fittest, who's like me, who looks like they've got it all together. So instead of that previous model of tapping on the shoulder, like opening that up, welcoming diversity, say, we'd love to have you participate on this. Who wants to be part of this? Not because they need our help, there may be other barriers, but because the work will be better, because they bring perspectives that we don't have, that we need to have to create communities of mutual thriving. And so it's an important piece that moving beyond what we've experienced or expected, and with that learning mindset to and welcoming the difference, because it's strength. There's strength in that.
I mean, look at the community you serve. You know, if
Yeah.
they all are they a homogenous group of people? Chances are no. So then make sure that the people that work for your organization are supposed to serve them, represent them.
Mhm.
What's unfortunate is, and I didn't bring the article with me, but there's a lot of big companies that are slashing DEI completely, or firing the DEI team. I think the Human Resources Association in the United States took equity out of their DEI initiatives. And but there are other companies that are even pushing more towards DEI, which is good to hear. And I don't want to get it wrong, but I think Microsoft is actually one of them. I'm not sure if anybody knows. I don't want to miss. I'll have to check that later. But there's some big name companies that we know that are moving away from DEI. So it's unfortunate. It's good to hear other companies are not, and I'm glad that we're talking about it. It's important.
Okay, no,
Tend to.
so many great things brought up. I think considering how our communities can be diverse and inclusive and be open and empathetic to that, I'd love to transition to this last category around community and self-care. And Kathy, I think you're queued up because you've got a really great excerpt.
You know, on self-care, shall I do the self-care
Either one, yeah,
instead
the
of community?
or the self-care one.
Sure,
that would be great.
this is a short one, it's
Okay.
good. No one can create your preferred life but you. You can't count on anyone, even a loving partner, to manage your well-being. Mutual thriving begins with personal thriving, and you are the only one who can make that happen. You can exercise agency to make your life what you want it to be, and it happens one decision at a time, saying no to the things that are not yours to do, and yes to your preferred life. And part of my personality is kind of some people pleasing and wanting to fulfill people's expectations. And so learning the power of your no is really important for creating space for the yeses, and moving more to that want to instead of just the should do. And if you're like me, there's occasional times I've said no, and guess what? The world didn't come to an end. And you're like, wow, I could have done that a long time ago. But to pursue learning, to pursue graduate, to come here tonight, to say, this is something that's important to me. And there's some no's that follow up with the yes there. So yeah, and that's kind of the part of the community. We don't thrive by doing everything, right? So it's, what are my yeses? What is it I can offer uniquely the world that they need from me? And how do I empower others in the community, but also for the community, right? It's about, if I'm not doing this well, there's somebody who can do that and who can shine and contribute and add something that I can't do when I'm, trying to do it.
And not be threatened by that.
Yes.
Yeah, not from a mindset of scarcity.
Yes.
Where you have to hold things so tightly to yourself, but one of abundance. Yeah. Just to build up what you said in terms of the power of saying no.
Yes.
We talk a lot about setting a boundaries, feeding off of and building off of the practice.
Yes.
You set a boundary for yourself and then give yourself some grace to practice setting it and holding it firm. Practice it. You're not always going to get it perfect out of the gate. And you also have to communicate it, and then also give other people some grace for them to get used to the boundary you set. And know that just because you said it doesn't mean they're always going to respect it, because if they're so used to you being a certain way, it's going to take time for them to get used to you doing something different. So practice, give them some time and opportunity to learn what your new boundary is, but commit to it,
Absolutely.
I think is important. So I wanted to build
Mhm.
off of that. You
Yeah.
said something else I wanted to talk, the
Yes.
sprint versus the marathon.
I was gonna ask that as
Okay, you were?
okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. You have to talk about that. Because
Yeah.
when you said that, I was
Yeah.
like, I'm in a sprint right now. So yeah,
Yeah.
share that.
So this comes from Lauren Schwartz's work with elite athletes, and they say, you know, these elite performers, whether in sports or other fields, they're not running a marathon. They're not going all out all the time, but they arrange their life in a series of sprints. Here's a go hard, and then there's a rest and pulling back, and go hard again, and a rest and pulling back. And one of the things that's built into my book is this practice loop of, you set an intention, you practice, but then there's the noticing and adjusting, right? Did that work? Why did it work? How do I I'm going to hold that boundary this time, and maybe I need to ask somebody to help me. Maybe my partner helps me. I remember you were going to do something else, or that was a firm no for you, or maybe it's a colleague at work that helps you with that. Yeah, that's been a very helpful thing for me to say, okay, there can be times of complete rest, whether that's one day, whether it's one Saturday a month where you just like, I'm just going to do whatever I want this Saturday, whether that's sleep in or a
feel
walk
guilty.
or coffee. The practice, it doesn't have to be daily. There's some daily things, but there can be weekly or monthly things that can be very restorative, that help you stay in the game, stay the
Yeah,
distance,
yeah.
right? Because that's what we want. We want to hold the distance. A term I love is rhythms of grace.
Oh.
Rhythms. We live
I
in
like
those
that too.
rhythms of grace
Grace.
for ourselves and for others. And yeah.
Yeah, it really resonated when you said that, because
Mhm.
since I started my business, it's been sprints and then moments of rest, sprints and
Mhm.
moments of rest. And I feel like now we're in a full on sprint. We have our seasons where we're sprinting. But it's also very tough because of, as a small business owner, woman owned, run, in a very competitive field of work. It's hard sometimes,
Mhm.
Oh my God, and the uncertainty with it, and then just hustling. So I appreciate you saying, like, it doesn't always have to be about sacrifice.
Mhm.
It's okay to go for the sprint, but know that when the moment of rest comes, embrace it
Mhm.
and not feel guilty.
Yeah.
So I went to Greece for 3 weeks, and she was talking me off the ledge a few times because I really had to. Are you going to be okay? Am I abandoning you? Is this okay? Will my business collapse? Will I? And it won't, because obviously you're there. And so anyways, when I got on the plane to go to
Mhm.
Greece, and hadn't been there in 6 years, my parents were there, and I was getting really emotional because I was able to go, and got a little bit of a prosecco there, and I'm sitting down and picked up my phone and I texted Katie, I feel so grateful for you. I feel so like everything's going to be a-okay. And yeah, you remember that text?
I
You
do.
Yeah. Yeah, so
And
it ties
that's
nicely
our-
with everything you were saying.
And
Yeah.
that's our community. That's our
Yeah.
community. And I've got a few stories about women who work in co-leadership, right? And that's a structure that lets them have that partnership
Yeah.
and both be human, right? And know that things aren't falling. So
Mhm.
whether that's a colleague that you hold that with, or an official co-leadership thing,
Mhm.
there are ways to do it. No one will take care of you but you.
Mhm.
And so that's the challenge and the opportunity. And when it doesn't go well, we notice and adjust, because we want to be around to love our families, to live a great life, to know that we've made a difference, and keep doing it. Mhm.
I think that's a very uplifting sort of way to wrap up this
Yeah.
part of our evening. I'd love to see if there's any questions, I guess virtually, if Jerry, you're able to flag any of those questions, or anyone in the room, for either Kathy or Joanna.
Louise?
Oh yeah.
Do you want me to move it over there?
Yeah, could you?
Yeah?
Yes.
let's go on.
Or we can also repeat it out loud.
Yeah.
Would you prefer if we do that? Just you say it and we can repeat it?
Okay,
Go
yeah,
for it.
we'll do that.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, I've enjoyed this evening very much. It's been excellent. And the book as well is inspiring. But when I read it, I thought, I wish I'd known this 20 years ago. So do you have any promotional plans to get the book into university students, young managers, and so
You want to repeat the question?
Great question. Yeah. So how can we get this to people? So the sentiment of, I wish I had this sooner. So how do you intend to promote it or share it with people at all stages, maybe earlier on in their professional career?
Mm.
It's a good question.
I'm thrilled to see women of all ages here tonight. So it's wonderful to see young women early in their careers who are stepping into things and learning. It's, as Joanna said, the sprints and so much work when you're building toward this. I would love to develop a companion journal and courses that can be done. And so those are next steps that I'm not quite there yet. But Joanna does have courses that she's working, and you can all help us. The book is here at Audrey's, and to share that. And if you follow us on social media, you know, opportunities that we're developing will come up. And yeah, we're excited because the power is also in the community of sharing this, right? As we gather in groups of women or leaders and say, how do we make this a thriving workplace? How do we individually thrive and create a place where we can all do our best work? So community conversation is a great way to make that happen. So inviting book clubs and some friends who've already done that to do that together. That's an active leadership saying, hey, I would love to make this a better workplace. Let's do a book study and invite other people to join in, and start with the people who are open to doing some reading. And both of us have structured short chapters for people with busy lives to get a bit of an idea or a taste that you can work with, and jump around a bit to see what to address your felt need at the moment. So
Yeah, those are all great ideas. We have a website where you can, there's a link to purchase it there. We have online courses. Every time that we do something with a client, we integrate this, we offer it through the courses that we do offer. The podcast is one way that we promote the work that we're doing, this book and other things that we're also promoting. Katie and I are co-authoring another book called Creating Brave Spaces. So it's all about psychological safety in the workplace as well. So doing more things like this, I think, really help as well. So it was a great question. Thank you. And I think we should probably bring the mic. It may be easier. I don't know, but
Sure.
okay.
Jerry, there is a question from
Oh, I see
the
that.
chat.
Okay, you'll read it out.
Okay, I've unmuted myself, so I got a question from Lydia in Montreal.
It's my sister.
just
There
saying.
goes the mystery. Her question is, what steps or actions can be considered when wanting to create a safe space for neurodivergent people on the autism spectrum, for example, or are there resources that can be referenced?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know references off by hand. I mean, I actually, I know someone who's wonderful. Her name is Tara Langdon, and
I was just going to mention her.
yeah, you can Google her. She is neurodiverse, and she's a coach who specializes in coaching people neurodiverse. She has a website. Does she not?
I watch her on LinkedIn, and she gives
Follow on
great,
LinkedIn.
great expectations. Curiosity is a key leadership capacity. Getting curious. What do you need to do your best work, right? Asking people. So again, we don't need to know everything, but then being willing to make adjustments. I remember one time in my career, there were going to be meetings at 8:30, department meetings. And a few of us said, you know, we have a hard time. No, the meetings will be at 8:30. And I would dropping my kids off, and my stomach would be upset. And I was like, oh, like there was really no reason why the meeting couldn't be at 8:45, right? So it's, as we step into positions of leadership, there are some hard lines, and where there aren't, why are we not opening up? What do you need? How do we create this? How do we work? And I remember apologizing to somebody. I'm sorry, I'm not here at like 8:15. And she said, it's okay, Kathy. I see you here at 6, you know, so-and-so's here at 7. They're covering the early stuff. And I know you're getting the job done. But I from that early time, and every time I was running a little late for a meeting, I was like, oh, and I think I need to get there safe, right? Why did we create that? I mean, that's just such a small piece of safety and well-being for people, right? Where are the places you can flex? Ask the question, what do they need? And yeah, so Tara has lots of great stuff, but it's for all of us, whether we fit in a category or not, what works? How do we create this? And a little bit of flexibility and honoring people's individuality, I think, goes a long way for loyalty, quality of work, commitment. Yeah.
to add to what you were saying, I think looking into psychological safety, and now her name escapes me. Amy Edmondson, yes, looking at her work, what's her book called? The Fearless Organization is the book. That's a good book to read. Follow her too. Our whole season 3 of our podcast, Tackle Tuesdays, on creating brave spaces, which is all about psychological safety. And what we basically state is, a lot of people say, create a safe space, create a safe space. But the truth is, just because we say it's a safe space doesn't make it so. So how do you work towards that? And so what we say for leaders is to start to demonstrate vulnerability and start to, just like Kathy said, ask questions. Don't make assumptions, and get to know your people, ask them questions, get to know who they are, what it is that they need, and start to share a little bit about yourself as well in a way that's appropriate and that you feel comfortable doing. But I think the minute you start to be vulnerable, you start to share a little bit, and that you're human and you make mistakes, it encourages other people to do the same. There was actually one of the participants, and it's in my book, basically, he talked about a time that he made a huge mistake and he admitted it, and people came up to him and said, oh my God, thank you. So I think if we can do that and people start to slowly feel safer, to come to us, they'll find the courage within them to start telling you what it is that they need. And then have the courage to say, like, it can't always be about equality. We have to look at how we make our workplaces more equitable so that people feel like they belong, they're included, they're respected, even though they're different, they may have different needs. There's someone in our family who had a job before where it was like, you will start at this time and you'll end at this time. It doesn't matter if your kids are sick, you cannot work from home. And now she has a new job, and it's like, you can start anywhere between, I don't know exactly, I think it was like 7:30 to 8:30. She's like, oh my God, I can actually bring my kids to daycare at a decent time. I can actually get my kids from daycare and not feel stressed about it. Like, to me, that's more of a psychologically safe workplace where we start to value people for their uniqueness and that they're different. So I think it's a process for sure. Yeah. But what you were saying, vulnerability, curiosity, psychological safety, these are things what you can start to research and read more about to learn how to do that.
And that's the true key to well-being. It's not a pizza lunch. It's not, like,
Oh, I don't mind though.
but if you get a pizza lunch and then they're like, and then they chastise you for being late for work, right? Like, it's how are we treating each other? How are we setting each other up to do good work and to apologize as a person, as a leader, I'm sorry I blew that. I was having a rough day, but please forgive me and thank you for telling me that was the problem. And now I can do better, right? As we know better, we can do better. As we're more self-aware, we can show up with more kindness and just equanimity for whatever comes. Empathy.
Yeah, empathy is the key to that too, I think. Yeah.
Question. Yeah, great answer.
Is there other? Yeah.
But I've added the link to Tara's LinkedIn on our chat.
Thank you.
Last name is Langan.
Oh, Langan.
Langan,
Yeah.
thank you.
So Tara Langan.
Yeah,
Tara Langan.
like I pronounced.
No D. It's okay.
There's no silent D. There's no D.
Okay, well, maybe I'll check to see if there's one more question from the room before we wrap up. Oh,
I have,
Yeah.
This is maybe like a very personal piece, but I'm just finishing a PhD, and my area of expertise is in higher education. So I'm just going to ask this question. You're both talking about environments for leadership development and sort of management and that sort of space. How did you find your doctoral programs in that respect?
Well, first of all, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's quite an amazing journey. So just to make sure I understand the question, in terms of what did I feel like the leadership was like in an academic setting? Yes.
Did your PhD program meet the standards you set out?
Yeah. Well, okay, fair enough. I had an amazing supervisor. So in that way, yes, here's the thing, because I was a practitioner. I was working at the time. I was like the in and out PhD person. I remember one of my professors said this. He goes, if you want to save the world with your PhD, you will never finish. So just come up with something that's practical and reasonable and just do it. And I finished it in 4 years. I was working full time and I got promoted twice during that time. So
Wow.
that's one thing I'm absolutely proud of, because
Yeah.
I thought I wasn't smart enough to actually do it. Right. And I have to give my PhD supervisor credit, because she also fed into my confidence. Right. And so she was so in many ways, she represented a lot of the leadership qualities, if not all of them, in terms of being honest, giving me critical feedback so I would improve and all of that. Right. And then the other professors that I connected with and bonded with were also the same way. But because I was like that in and out person, like I went in, I did my studies and I left. I didn't understand truly the full culture. But you start to talk to people and you start to get a sense for what it's like. And I have a lot of friends who work in academia as well. And what I discovered was the leaders, there are a lot of similarities. People in academia, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're professors, they're researchers. That's where their heart is. It's not leading. And they don't necessarily know how to lead. And they struggle there. And I don't know if academia does a good job in preparing them to lead. It's probably like all the other sectors that I talked about, all the other industries. It's the same thing. Like they just throw them into that position. I also heard a rumor that they have a very hard time finding chairs and deans. Nobody really wants to go for those positions. So it's like pulling teeth and trying to like coax people and bribe them to want to go into those positions, right? So I think there are similarities for sure. And I think there's a lot of potential for growth to support them, because we look up to those professors and want support, right? We're their employees in some ways, right? As the students and their PhD candidates and so on. So hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, I did my doctorate in
Oh, yeah.
oh, yeah, sorry.
I keep
Yes,
forgetting, sorry.
I've got a mic, yeah. My doctoral work was an online degree from the University of Calgary, and I too had a great supervisor. I was so grateful for the way she mediated that for me, and finding, with anything we do, the hard work of doing that work while you're working full time comes because you're absolutely passionate, right? Because there were days when I'd be studying and it was a sunny day and my family was all doing stuff, and I would read something and I'm like, this is why I'm doing this. It just affirmed it was in my area of research. And another shameless plug, I've just published a chapter in a book called The Doctoral Journey. I believe everybody who embarks on that has a mountain to climb, personal, academic, professional, often while they're doing that. So it's not for the faint of heart. And so again, congratulations. So then your why becomes so critically important, right? When we've got these big audacious goals and we pursue them. Your why is what will get you through when that's the case. So, and I mean, we can't paint a brush. There's no perfect, schools, universities that, there are challenges everywhere. And so again, my work was, what am I in control of? How do I show up as the kind of leader? And I, as an adjunct professor, I try to create a safe space like that. And, for people to pursue their passions and do what's most important for them. But this is a human endeavor where we do our best and we make mistakes and hopefully learn and keep moving forward and supporting each other to do our best. So thank you.
Smidge over time, but I want to. You're all still here. So are there any final questions? We have a big room, so I want to make sure everyone has a chance to ask Kathy and Joanna. Yeah. So I'll give it a little more time. If anyone has any questions.
Oh, over here.
Oh, yes, please. Maybe I'll hand this to you.
Thank you. I'm kind of going to follow up on this last question and dig in a little bit on, because I love that. Like, I think that this is such it just feels so right, everything that you guys are speaking of and writing about. But how do we make it real in the real world? And I honestly do believe that university is a big part of the problem. I know, I personally know someone very closely and am very well aware of what goes on and how they speak about psychological safety in their town halls. And then the things that they actually do are so not there, and to the point that, even industry is saying to university, like, forget about the psychological safety and all that kind of stuff. universities aren't preparing people to work
Yeah.
in business. They're not teaching them the right things. So,
Yeah.
if university isn't espousing all
Huge.
these things, we're not teaching people how
Yeah.
do we, where do we start? Where do we fix the problem?
Great question.
You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the mission of our company is to revolutionize workplaces. And I got this line from Sir Ken Robinson. He was a leadership expert, specifically in the education system, and he died. As I was writing the book, I found out he died. I was really sad. And then another theorist that I loved, I found out he died too. I was like, this book is jinxed, I guess. But in any case, he said the job of a leader is climate control. I don't know if you've heard this one. It's climate control. It's about moving away from a climate of command and control to a climate of possibility. And that's our mission, right? To revolutionize workplaces, to create a climate of possibility where we can support leaders in teaching them the skills to maximize the human potential in their workforce. And that's our purpose. And that's what we do. And we work very hard at it, and we promote that. And more people are really picking up on that. So most of our clients are government and law enforcement. So a lot of the people are reaching out to me are the chiefs of police, and they're men. So they're getting it. I can't speak to academia because we don't, I'll talk about academia in a second, but I'm beginning to see a shift a little bit because they're coming to me as a woman and saying, I love what you're doing and we want that here. So I feel like I'm going to ride that tide, and we're fierce gender advocates, gender equity advocates, and we're not afraid to speak what we need to say. But there's still ways to go. So we're trying to do our part that way. I've been trying to get into academia to teach for a very long time, and very unsuccessfully. And so I'm doing what I can there, but I don't know what the barrier is to us getting in there, to doing that. So I don't know how to break down that wall or break through it. Yeah. So I don't have an answer for that. That's what the part I was going to say about academia. That's my challenge with it. Oh yeah, you don't need it. Why do I keep doing that? Yeah. Maybe you have thoughts about that. I don't know. But yeah, okay.
Well, and like all work, it starts with us, right? It starts with the personal work of leadership. You gather, and I look around this room with like-minded colleagues and friends who have helped me show up with courage and for different things. And we gather the people around us who have ears to hear what we have to share, because it's a personal change. Policy is helpful, but policy does not change people's hearts. And that is the work of changing people's hearts. And as I read, I was reading a beautiful novel, The Sweetness of Water, and it was about the end of the Civil War. But just because the war ended and slavery ended, didn't mean that all of a sudden people got paid fairly. Like, people's hearts had to change. And it took courageous people to stand up and say, I'm going to pay a fair wage to these Black men. And they took a lot of flack. But what gives us courage to stand up and change our workplaces? Our community, people who see us and who trust us. And I think for my book, I'd wanted to write it for a long time, but I think we're at a pivotal point in history. Post-pandemic, there are people who are really trying to go back to the way things were, and we're not going back. And there are labor shortages everywhere. So this is a time when women can ask for what they want. And a number of women in my study had to move outside of traditional systems, because the male-dominated hierarchical systems were not creating the kinds of opportunities they wanted to create a community that they wanted to be a part of. And so you never know. I don't know everyone who's in the audience, and you share with two friends and they share with two friends, and you live and model what you want to see, and you raise other people up, and that's the small community changing the world. The quote from Margaret Wheatley, I actually took it out. Who says that a small group of people can't change the world? In fact, that's all that ever has. But I studied lots of her daughter's works, Mary Catherine Bateson, and I heard a podcast, and she said, we could never find the book where that's written. We see that quote with Margaret. She said, it's totally consistent with everything she taught and lived, but we can't find the place where she wrote or said that that actual term. And it, you know, I can't watch the big world picture a lot. That news is too discouraging, so that we can choose our thinking, right? And we can choose what we fill our minds and hearts with, and we can choose our companions, and we choose those people who lift us up. And that's what gives me hope to carry on. And we offer our little piece and hope that everyone else will step in. So that's, yeah, that's my offering to that. Recognizing a need for great change and lots, all over. Lots of pockets of goodness and still lots of progress to make.
What I loved most about what you said was courage. And
Courage.
that's us.
Courage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Should I maybe?
We can wrap it up.
We'll wrap up, and of course, you're invited to stick around and mix mingle, come up and chat with Kathy and Joanna. So I'll end off by saying thank you so much again to all of you for coming out tonight. This was a really energizing conversation. So thank you to both of these impressive women for writing the book and sharing it and speaking so openly and vulnerably tonight. So big round of applause. Thank you so much. Not sure where some of the oh, we don't.
And thank you to thank you to Katie, because I threw her
Katie,
into
our
it. I said, "You're gonna do this?" And she's like, "Yeah." So you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much.